Creating a user interface in C++ is another labyrinth that you have to navigate. I can't speak for Linux and Mac OS, but on Windows there are like 10 different official ways to make a UI, each with varying degrees of support for C++. It's hard to figure out which ones are still maintained. Some of them haven't been updated in a long time, and some of them were dead on arrival. Microsoft has developed a habit of pushing out new APIs and unceremoniously abandoning old ones. Some developers write their front end in a different language, like C# when they can, but overall it seems like C++ developers have lost their faith in Microsoft and have opted to jump straight into using cross-platform solutions. Qt is often cited as being the de facto standard for cross-platform applications. It's used in desktop applications like DaVinci Resolve, Maya, Houdini, and VirtualBox. It also supports mobile, embedded, automotive, and IoT devices, but it's not without any issues. People frequently complain about the licensing model being difficult to understand. It uses an outdated version of C++ instead of modern C++. It comes with its own IDE called Qt Creator, and although it's not mandatory, most tutorials seem to use it, so you might struggle to use a different one which you might be more comfortable with. Some devs argue that Qt is bloated, but I can't confirm or deny that. It does have a lot of features, that's for sure. In some respects, that's considered a good thing. Another common gripe amongst developers is that when you use Qt, your code becomes tightly coupled to it. They have their own types like QString that you have to use instead of standard string. But honestly, Qt is probably your best bet for most cross-platform applications. Widgets is another cross-platform GUI library, but it's specifically for desktop applications. Its main advantage is that it's a wrapper around each operating system's built-in UI controls, so it provides a native look and feel for your application. But man, some of these libraries are just so damn old. The documentation and the website and the screenshots are so dated, it really doesn't inspire much confidence. There aren't very many new and fresh but also comprehensive C++ libraries being developed, because there's little to no financial incentive for it. That's why we're stuck with these frameworks from the 90s. These days, software developer mindshare has predominantly moved to software as a service products, and by extension, web technologies, because they're faster to build and you can make more money with subscriptions, where you charge for something behind an API, instead of building desktop software which is typically charged as a one-time purchase. But even desktop software like VS Code, Discord, Slack, Microsoft Teams, Notion, Obsidian, Postman, and Figma are all built with web technologies. I know that most C++ devs would balk at the thought of using a web-based frontend, but web undeniably has the most rich ecosystem for UI. The sheer number of libraries which are available makes it possible to make highly sophisticated, polished interfaces with minimal friction. It's probably the most cost-effective, time-efficient way of creating a stunning cross-platform UI. You can make something in Electron or Atari and have it communicate with a C++ backend. The obvious disadvantage is the bloat and the performance cost, but you might not need the UI to be super performant if you're just clicking some buttons. It really depends on what your application does. The clear advantage is that it's faster to ship, and unlike typical C++ applications, you don't need to wait for your code to recompile when you make a tiny change to the UI. You also have the benefit of a clear separation of concerns between the front end and the back end. And it's easier and cheaper to get web developers to contribute to the UI because they're more abundant than C++ developers who know how to use Qt or Widgets. Outside of web technologies, some of the most popular C++ heavy products have custom-built UIs. Adobe products are written in C++ and they use a custom internal Adobe UI framework. Unreal Engine also has a custom-built UI. Blender, which is an open-source 3D computer graphics software tool, has a phenomenal UI, but it's custom-built directly on top of OpenGL, and it's strongly coupled to Blender's codebase. Building a UI from scratch is a Herculean task, but if you're crazy and want to do it anyway, I'd caution you against using OpenGL like Blender did, because at this point in time, it's a legacy graphics API. Vulkan had great potential to be supported on every major operating system, but Apple threw a wrench in that by deciding not to support it on Apple products. And also Vulkan is prohibitively complicated to use, so I wouldn't pick that either. WebGPU is emerging as a strong contender for modern cross-platform graphics development. Don't let the name throw you off. It's not just for the web. It's very well suited for cross-platform desktop applications. It has big corporate backers like Google, Mozilla, Apple, Intel, and Microsoft, and is said to be the next best thing. But you really never know how the future is going to turn out. Picking technologies these days is like picking stocks in the stock market. If you don't want to build something from scratch with a graphics API, there are a lot of other cross-platform UI libraries and frameworks available for C++, but they're all for different niches. GUI is fantastic for creating debugging windows for game engines or simulations, but it's not really meant for user-facing UIs. Juice is for audio applications and audio plugins. GTK has first-class support for Linux, which is good for Linux, but they don't seem too keen on fixing bugs that occur on Windows. FLTK is another option, but it looks really outdated. There are many others too, but I didn't include them because honestly, I'm never impressed with the applications that are built with them. A common theme I see is that new GUI libraries for C++ advertise themselves as being modern. But this ends up being unintentionally deceptive because what they really mean is that the library is written in modern C++, not that the UI will look modern. In other words, modern C++ does not equal a modern-looking UI.